CLU has been a longtime partner of ICUJP, and Matthew is the latest to come to us to share what the extraordinary work that CLU is doing. And I want to personally thank Matthew. This is an extremely busy time. He was able to carve out time to prepare for today and to join us. So welcome so much.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. Blessed colleagues at ICUJP. My name is Matthew. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the faith-rooted organizer in Los Angeles and Santa Monica for CLU. It's my profound honor to be here with you this morning and to speak about my own journey into organizing, the work we do here at CLU in coalition and partnership with our labor and union partners, and how we can build a movement for worker justice and for racial and economic justice going forward in the years to come. So before we get into how CLU has responded to the pandemic and many of the actions and campaigns we've been involved with, as well as what's in store, I want to speak briefly about myself and how I came to this work and what the experience has been for me so far at CLU. So again, I'm Matthew, he, him, and I grew up here in Southern California in Cerritos, in Southeast Los Angeles County on the border with Orange County. And I came from a biracial and interfaith family. I am white Ashkenazi Jewish and also Chinese American. Both of my family histories and my identities really inform so much of the work I do for immigration justice and labor justice, from my Chinese American family history of needing to evade America's racist immigration laws to get around the Chinese Exclusion Act, to my Ashkenazi Jewish family and their history of escaping persecution and pogroms in Eastern Europe, finding refuge in the United States, but of course, navigating our history and our society and our way of racialized structures and economic systems. All this that I take to heart now that I'm working in Los Angeles, doing social justice work, really in the footsteps of so many movement ancestors before us, but also like so many wonderful people in this room that are still CLU members that have built our faith-rooted justice movement to what it is today, and that can continue to build our power for the years to come. So I grew up in Cerritos, and I went to UC Irvine for college, where I studied history and music. And then I went to New York University for graduate school. I studied Jewish history and literature, Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Judaism, early Christianity in graduate school. And around the time of 2016, the time of the Trump election, I was called and felt the discernment of my need to be involved, to take my faith, my Jewish faith and my Jewish grounding in social justice, as well as my Asian American identity, and pursue justice work. And I first did work with progressive Jewish organizations like Bend the Arc, where I completed a fellowship in 2017. I've worked with other Jewish progressive organizations like Never Get Action on immigration justice. I've worked with electoral campaigns, and this journey has taken me to CLU, which I had worked with in different capacities as a volunteer in the years past, but now I am the faith-rooted organizer in Los Angeles and Santa Monica since January. The past few months have just been incredible experience for me as I've gotten to know our committee members, meet workers, and really learn from their experiences and stories, and be part of these sustained campaigns for justice and liberation and worker justice in Los Angeles. Of course, I know many of you may know CLU. I know that many of you have been involved with CLU as members or as partners or collaborators for many, many years. So just to touch upon who we are, for anyone who might not be familiar, CLU is Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. And we bring clergy and lay leaders of all faiths together with the marginalized, the unheard, and the least protected, low-wage workers in our cause of a just economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. And we really take this mission to heart. We are there to be an accompaniment with workers, not to solve problems for them, not to be saviors, if you will, ourselves, but to be an accompaniment with workers as they take agency, as they take leadership, as they inspire us with their courage and persistence and build a just world for all of us. CLU was founded in the 1990s by some legends of the civil rights and nonviolence movements, like Reverend James Lawson, and really a number of other foundational figures who have built our faith-rooted justice movement here in Southern California, such as Reverend Jim Kahn and Rabbi Neil Comas Daniels. And from our humble beginnings in the 1990s, we have built ourselves to a resilient and vigorous movement of clergy and laity and congregations and faith leaders and allies and accomplices in solidarity with workers and for immigration and racial justice. We are active not only in Los Angeles, but also in Southern LA County. We have a South Bay and Long Beach committee. And also for a number of years, we've been very active in Orange County as well, where we've just been central to so many like enduring and collaborative campaigns for worker and racial justice in Orange County, which is so exciting to see. And in our history, we've been honored to just be at the forefront of so many incredible movements, whether it's the fight for the living wage in Santa Monica, or so many fights in solidarity with Unite Here Local 11 for hotel workers and their contracts and their struggles for justice. And what I want to talk about today is how we've really shown up in the time of the Trump administration and beyond, but especially in the time of the pandemic. So at CLU, we're incredibly proud of how we've showed up, both in response to the deep challenges of organizing for justice under the Trump administration, but especially how we've responded to the pandemic. So during the Trump administration, when all of the systemic inequalities came to the forefront because of the explicit embrace of white supremacy and, if you will, fascism by the Trump administration, we really heeded that call and had the discernment that we needed to show up in so many ways in solidarity with workers and with immigrants and with BIPOC communities and other marginalized communities to not only respond to the harms of the Trump administration, but also to transform our society, to build power for a better future. So during the past 5-6 years, we have not only continued to advance our mission of educating, mobilizing and organizing the faith community in solidarity with workers and their families, but we've also really honored our call to work towards immigration justice and racial justice and housing justice, and to incorporate those into our programs and public presence. So I'd like to give just a few examples of that. So in terms of immigration justice work, we've been a sustained participant in immigration justice coalitions in Orange County and also in the Inland Empire, including one that has focused on justice for those detained at the Adelanto Detention Center in the desert, in the high desert. And our program director, Guillermo, has been at the forefront of that work. There's so many actions that we've taken a part of, but also participated in building our structures within the faith community in Los Angeles for the kinds of support and accompaniment that immigrants need, even as they're released from detention. So we have been involved with many mutual aid and rapid response programs, and also have been big contributors to the Echo Park Immigration Center, which is a collaboration in Echo Park to provide support for immigrants who are released from detention or are being housed in our communities so that they are supported and embraced by our communities. Another example for how we have embraced racial justice as quintessential and essential for our quest for worker justice has been so many ways in which we've shown up. But something that comes to mind from before I came into my role as a CLU organizer was during the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd. CLU and Black Lives Matter Los Angeles collaborated to organize an incredibly profound and transformative memorial service and action in downtown Los Angeles at First Street and Broadway that maybe some people here may have attended, in which we honored the life of George Floyd, embraced the call of Black Lives Matter towards racial justice and police accountability, and also gave voice to the families of those whose loved ones had been murdered by the police here in Los Angeles and Southern California. And so I have a short video clip to share. It's from that action on June 8th, 2020, when we were at the George Floyd Memorial. There were so many rousing speeches and calls to action, but what I'm going to share is just a minute or two from a song towards the end of the action, sung by K.O. Anderson, who does beautiful music for Church Without Walls and also a McCarthy Memorial Church. And can see how our diverse interfaith community and allies and accomplices came together to be resilient and to embrace this call to action for justice. Okay.
How many out there got their mind on freedom? Let me hear you say freedom! 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 Justice! Justice! I said I woke up this morning with my mind stay on justice. Stay on justice. Oh. I woke up, stay on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind. Stay on justice. Hallelujah. 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 Singing and praying with my mind. Yeah. Stay on justice. Singing and praying with my mind. Stay on justice. Singing and praying with my mind. Stay on justice. Hallelujah.
So I was there at this memorial, and it was an incredibly moving experience as we joined as a community and gathered to think through how can we take action for racial justice and to build a just future for our society in America and in Southern California. So in addition to the ways in which we've really embraced the call to fight for immigration and racial justice as part of our vision for worker justice, we're also especially proud of how we responded to the pandemic since 2020. So as soon as the pandemic came into the forefront in March 2020, and in the 2.5 years since, we have responded in incredibly transformative ways, both practical and also strategic. So first, the practical ways. Early on in 2020, we joined Unite Here at a number of food banks that served the entire community, and especially were a balm for workers who were let go during the pandemic. And also, since the COVID pandemic began, we have done ongoing COVID response work, much of it led by my colleague, Reverend Walter Contreras, in partnership with the Los Angeles County Department of Health. and the COVID-19 Community Equity Fund. What we do and continue to do to this day is provide education and information about COVID-19 and public health best practices and information, as well as distributing physical resources like PPE, and especially making sure that our faith communities and also marginalized communities that often were disproportionately affected by COVID, but also do not have equal access to resources and treatment, are given those materials and that information and that treatment so that we can all have an equitable response to the COVID pandemic. And our response to the pandemic has also been strategic. We use the power of our advocacy and the reach of our faith communities to help move forward policies that our working families very much need. So for example, in early 2021, CLU partnered with Unite Here, and many of our members traveled to Sacramento and pushed for the passage of a state right to recall law, so that workers in industries like hotels and hospitality and so many others that were let go during the pandemic, now that those businesses were going back and returning to business, that these workers have the right to be hired back at hotels and other places of business in order of seniority, rather than these businesses and these corporations being able to use this crisis, this disaster of the pandemic, as an opportunity to continue to exploit and dispose of workers and move on. And even though many employers, hotels and others have flaunted these laws, we and our partners in the labor movement, including especially Unite Here Local 11, have held them to account. There have been many instances already where hotels and other employers who were found in violation of the recall law have been cited in order to pay a lot of money to workers. And we're going to continue to hold our society accountable so that workers can claim what's theirs, can claim their rights, and to work in our society with dignity and justice. So we're so proud of the ways in which we've responded to the shocks in our society over the past few years, politically and culturally, and also responded to the pandemic. And we've sought to envision not just responding to these moments of crisis, but also building a resilient faith community for justice and finding what kinds of opportunities can present themselves in these moments of crisis and urgency so that we can transform our faith community and our society for the better, for a just future. And it's really important to note that the pandemic has been so really tough on workers, and workers have been affected in very profound and intense ways by the pandemic. So during the early times of the pandemic and many times after, workers were let go of their jobs, usually without any kind of severance or benefits, in order to continue taking care of themselves and their families. And others who were able to keep their work, especially who were considered to be in essential roles, were sort of made to work in unsafe conditions that exposed so many of them to COVID and the risk, unfortunately, as we've seen, of serious illness and death. In so many industries that I've partnered with, even in the past 6 months, not only hotel workers, but also healthcare workers, skilled nursing facility workers, grocery and retail workers, we hear the same things that are continuing to put pressure and difficulty on workers in this time of the pandemic and beyond. Workers are underpaid. So many of these roles do not pay them what they deserve, do not pay them enough to provide for themselves, for their families, to pay a reasonable rent in this housing market. And workers are also understaffed. In so many industries, whether it's housekeepers or skilled nurses, and other kinds of industries, grocery and retail workers are understaffed. And This is often done to just sort of maximize the profit line, but it results in unsafe conditions for workers being injured, workers being overworked. And also in the case of something like hospitals or skilled nursing facilities, it also endangers patient care. And this is something we hear all the time from pharmacists, from skilled nurses, from other medical professionals, that not only them being underpaid, but them being understaffed endangers patient care. And we also know that employers, corporations are resisting unionization. They're resisting worker organizing at every turn they have, at every opportunity they have. And I think everyone across the country has really taken inspiration from what we've seen across the country in new industries where maybe there hasn't been as much success unionizing in the past or organizing in the past, like workers at Amazon or at Starbucks. Everyone across the country has taken inspiration by the way that many of these workers have been able to, in a very visible and public and inspiring way, organize themselves, but also shift these narratives around the power that workers have. It's really important as we discuss how we want to build our faith community for worker power going forward, that how much agency and power workers have. You know, to step away from an idea of even though many of our communities do have different kinds of privilege or relative power that we can use in solidarity to transform our society, that we can do that as allies and accomplices, but workers don't need us to save them or to fix things for them, but rather to be in solidarity and be alongside them. That workers are saving themselves in so many ways. We're seeing the power of strikes and labor campaigns coming together in solidarity, our communities coming together in solidarity to achieve really powerful, life-changing contracts with real material benefits. So just some examples of that. In May, at CLU, we organized in solidarity with United Healthcare Workers, SEIU, UHW, and the certified nursing assistants and technicians of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, as they went on a 5-day strike in demand of better wages, better staffing, and better patient care. Those same principles that I mentioned that really resonate with so many other industries as well. And they went on a 5-day strike that we supported, bringing out our clergy for rallies and offering prayers and spiritual guidance and support. And they came together for a vibrant 5-day strike. And in the end, within two weeks after the strike, they won an incredible contract. We see that in April, in the spring, the grocery workers in different market companies represented by UFCW 770 won an incredibly transformative contract, did not go on strike because they had built the power to get that win, to get that contract. But of course, we were organizing our faith community in support and prepared to support in any way. And that's how we're going to continue to engage and organize our people, including you all, and prepare to be in solidarity and accomplishment in the years ahead. So as we really embrace the future that's ahead of us, the next few years, and the opportunities we're going to have to build power for justice, we want to just highlight a few things in just the recent past, like mostly this year, that CLU and our labor partners have done and have just been so inspiring and resulted in incredible wins. So one of those is the Raise LA campaign with Unite Here Local 11. Some of you may have been involved with this campaign or heard about it. Unite Here Local 11 undertook an inspiring campaign called Raise LA with 2 ballot initiatives the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance and the Responsible Hotel Ordinance. And we gathered signatures all across the city, from every part of the city, every community. Unite Here Local 11 and their partners gathered more than 100,000 signatures for these two initiatives. The first, which is incredible for justice for hotel workers, especially housekeepers, the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance, which will sort of chart the course of it, but it's now going to be in law very soon, passed into law in the city of Los Angeles. It will really address these persistent problems for hotel workers, especially housekeepers, being overworked and underpaid and at risk of intimidating behavior. So this Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance protects housekeepers from being overworked by mandating an upper limit on how many square feet of hotel rooms they can be assigned to clean a day. It also requires automatic daily room cleaning so that housekeepers are not overworked by having to clean rooms that had not been cleaned every day, and provides them panic buttons because there's this persistent phenomenon of threats and sexual harassment and intimidation that unfortunately so many housekeepers face from guests at hotels, and that they've openly and publicly testified in so many different ways and shared their stories and testimonies. And so this ordinance gives them panic buttons to help address that. And the second ordinance is the Responsible Hotel Ordinance, which will make sure that luxury hotel developments do not continue to exacerbate the affordable housing crisis in Los Angeles, to make sure that they do not displace affordable housing. So CLU and our faith-rooted justice community showed up in an enormous way for this Raise LA campaign. In addition to all of the community building and the knocking on doors that Unite Here did, we organized and mobilized the faith community to sign petitions and to organize their own communities in support of building the sustained movement for worker justice. So we reached out to numerous congregations and faith-rooted and interfaith organizations across the city of Los Angeles from every region and from numerous faith traditions: Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, Catholic, Unitarian. And we showed up as guests at worship services, Friday night Shabbat services, Sunday church services. We often brought workers with us to tell their stories so that people can hear directly from workers about what they experience in the workplace and why these policies are necessary. And of course, we gathered petition signatures from congregations. We recruited congregants who were inspired by our vision to take petitions and gather their own signatures. And we really reinvigorated not only working with our existing CLU members, but building sustained coalitions and partnerships with others whom we hadn't worked with in a while or as directly, and collaborated with them. And going forward, we hope to continue to build power with the entire faith-rooted community in Los Angeles. So as part of the Raise LA campaign, as CLU, we collaborated with 20 congregations and faith organizations from every region of the city of Los Angeles, Central LA and Hollywood, the West Side, the East Side, South LA, the San Fernando Valley, and as I mentioned, from numerous and diverse faith traditions. And we gathered almost 500 petition signatures per petition, which of course went to the bigger total of more than 100,000 per petition, but really, as I mentioned, planted the seeds for this vision of a faith-rooted justice community that we hope to build. So I have one more video clip that I want to share. And this is a really inspiring announcement that Reverend and Pastor J. Edgar Boyd of Fame, First African Methodist Episcopal Church, shared during his worship service when we were his guests at Fame, and really speaking to his own congregants about the importance of the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance and why these transformative policies for worker justice are so essential in Los Angeles in the future and going forward. And I really am inspired by this clip because it shows that when you really center the voices of workers, when you center the leadership and agency of workers, but also speak from our faith values, our interfaith and diverse, but deeply held and deeply rooted faith values, we can not only mobilize people to take action, but we can organize people to organize their own people. And that's how we build our transformative movement. So just a short clip from Reverend Boyd.
We are happy today to welcome members of an organization called CLU, and that's Clergy and Laity United in Economic Justice. Clergy and Laity United in Economic Justice. They're here today to share with us some information and to get our support through petitions for a very important movement forward. They are community organizers, so they get their energy from you, from me, from voters, and from people who have voice in city and civic government, wherever it is. So they're here to ask you to support them in their Hotel Workers Initiative to ensure fair compensation for the heavy workload that those who are on staff at hotels, who become the maids and who become the maintenance persons, who do the heavy lifting of housekeeping in those institutions, not just in LA, but completely across the country. But we look and focus on those right here in our area right now. They don't get the wage response that they need by way of salary and by way of income. And they don't get consideration many times as it relates to the workload. And all of us know, coming out of this pandemic, anywhere you go, restaurant, hotels, any place you go where there are employees, there's always a void in employment. You just can't find enough staff to cover the needs and the demands. In the housekeeping industry, in the hospitality industry, they are part of that void. And those who are working many times are asked to fill, to take up the slack, take up the void that's left by the absence of other workers. And so this initiative will help to ensure that there's compensation for those who have their workloads increased. And there also is compensation for those who do the heavy lifting of providing for our housekeeping and our hospitality needs. Amen? That's one part of it. The second.
Amen. Amen, Pastor Boyd. I'm really just moved by that testimony, connecting our communities to workers, right? And connecting our faith community to workers. And when we do that, when we build this power, we can just have such transformative wins. So there's something just incredible to celebrate, in addition to everything else we do in our faith-rooted organizing movement, that the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance has been signed into law by Mayor Garcetti and will take into effect, I believe, in less than a month. And so this is an incredible victory for Unite Here, for the entire labor movement, and for CLU. After we gathered more than 100,000 petition signatures, and after their verification process, the City Council of the City of Los Angeles in late June passed the initiative into law themselves without it having to go to the ballot by a 10-3 vote. And then 2 weeks ago, Mayor Garcetti, in a ceremony with Councilmember Kevin De Leon, but also the worker members of Unite Here, who had been so resilient every day, knocking on doors, building the power for this victory. They were there for the signing ceremony as Mayor Garcetti signed this into law. And I am incredibly inspired by this victory and looking forward to what's to come. And at this moment, I want to turn it over to our partner, Pastor Brady Roberts, the Director of Community Organizing at Unite Here Local 11, to speak on some more context about our work and what's for the future. Of course, because of the sensitive nature of many of these campaigns, we want to be able to share what we can while still being sensitive to confidentiality and the needs for for our flexibility and our power building. But we're honored to have Pastor Bridie to share from Unite Here. Thank you, Pastor Bridie.
Thank you, Matt. And thanks for such a wonderful replug into the scope of what CLU is doing right now. CLU, of course, has been a beloved partner of Unite Here since its very inception. Our workers are people of faith. The bosses are usually people of faith. Employees that, like they're the people who's negotiating table of people of faith. And so it's really important to have spiritual presence and accompaniment and solidarity during the struggle that we're in, right? Unite Here is a community union. We believe in our work being work that is transformative for our entire city, our entire community. And that's done by choosing to be invested in deep community partnerships. In our work and path to achieve worker justice. We did have a worker leader invited to join us today. I wanted to share with you the reason she's not going to share is that this is going to be posted on YouTube. And so there has to be a lot of other considerations. So we would love to bring workers back to meet with you in a more confidential setting in the future. But I will share with their permission some of the outcomes that we have coming. So Matt already shared about the initiatives with you. This has been a long road to bring it to Los Angeles and to win such an incredible victory, but many of you actually walked in various parts of that journey over the years. This initiative first happened and was brought to the ballot in Long Beach, and it was a long and difficult struggle. And then it went to Santa Monica, where Kathy and her friends over there helped ensure that a wonderful piece of legislation was passed. Then it went to West Hollywood. And the West Hollywood City Council members took this initiative to protect hotel workers and made it one of the strongest that we had seen so far and passed the highest minimum wage in the nation for workers. The initial legislation only covered hospitality workers. They expanded it to all workers in West Hollywood. And then we undertook this incredible piece of work, this effort of talking to more than 100,000 people on the doors, to talk about the issues of working people, of building a Los Angeles that's sustainable for all, and invited them to put on the ballot some measures that would really help change the lives of working people in the city. And they wanted to, they did. Never before has any organization brought forward 2 ballots at the same time and qualified in the history of Los Angeles. It is amazing. And I'm really proud to say that our union also, because of what, and I want you to know who's carrying the clipboards, right? It's hotel housekeepers, it's food service workers, it's the folks from the stadium, it's Matt and other Cluistas and volunteers and students and partners and allies, right? And yeah, we had some paid canvassers too, but now they're recruited and becoming a part of the movement. Very, very powerful stuff. And they carried other petitions as well that are life-changing for the future of the city. And we're very proud to say that we contributed more than 45,000 signatures to a really prominent housing initiative that's going to be coming up and a bunch of other things. So we're really proud of that work. And we cannot even begin to, we have some idea, but we know that this initiative is going to be transformative to the industry. So just a quick snapshot. Matt gave you a good understanding of where we have been and what's been happening through the pandemic. He mentioned the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on workers. And we have seen it, the difficulties that folks in retail, at grocery stores and hospitals have faced. I think that hospitality workers have a pretty unique place in this. Within 2 weeks of the first public shutdown order, we lost the employment of about 90% of our members. Full, massive layoffs. So first, the hotels are not allowed to have guests or travelers. Then, so that's our members. Then the universities send their students home. Those are our kitchens and places where we clean in the dorms. And then the LA Times runs an article on the front cover of the paper saying it's okay to fly, just don't eat the food. Well, that food is made in totally sterile kitchens that employ 7,000 people and their families, and they lose their jobs. At that time, at the beginning of the pandemic, the LA Times estimated that more than 250,000 hospitality workers would lose their jobs in California. I think it probably ended up being higher. I haven't seen final numbers. What we know is that our union was decimated overnight. And what we saw happen through the course of the pandemic was workers coming together and pushing for all kinds of change, a lot that Matt has shared. And I'd love to come back to you and talk to you about how we were the only ground game in the country running to take out Trump against Biden. We went to Arizona. We sent 250 people pre-vaccine in 110-degree heat, very difficult circumstances to win democracy and freedom for people. But that's for another day. But now that workers are starting to return, we are seeing conditions that are as difficult as we have ever known them inside the workplace. Only about 2/3 of the workers have been brought back. The hotels and other places of employment are reluctant to bring back everybody. And frankly, some people, I mean, the pandemic has been hard on all of us, and some people just can't do the work anymore. It is so difficult, so heavy, and so hard. And so people are retiring. They're leaving the industry. But a lot of that is because at this moment, hotels are also doing other things. Have any of you traveled recently and seen and stayed in a hotel and realized that they're not doing daily room cleaning, right? Or have they made you request it? And this is a sort of a greenwashing, COVID washing, I would call it, attempt to tell you that it's for your safety or it's to protect the environment, though the industry has never provided any substantive reports that show that not getting daily room cleaning saves water. But what it does do is ensure that every housekeeper is cleaning a full day of checkout rooms, the heaviest work in the industry. And this is just devastating for people. Like the work is so heavy, it's so hard. And there's just not enough of them to do it. So conditions are super bad. And so the housekeeping initiative is really powerful because it puts the power back in the hands of the workers. It creates really safe and sustainable levels of work. And it allows people on the job to have protection in isolated places. And we were able to pass this in one of the largest housing markets, or excuse me, one of the largest tourism markets and hotel markets in the country, if not the world. So kudos to everyone here who participated in that. And that fight, that's just the beginning. That opens the door, and it's an organizing opportunity. And so I would plant that seed in your mind to think, like, what could come next? If my city doesn't have it, should it have it, right? Glendale adopted it, okay? Pasadena, we got to come for you, Anthony. And there's a lot of work to do here. And so then I just want to move into highlighting two campaigns that I think really respond to this. I don't know, Matt, if this is the time to do that. Yeah. So do we have any Dodgers fans in the house? Few. I'm not a baseball person, but I know that LA is Dodgers town. Recently, you may have seen in the news that Levy Compass workers who work at Dodger Stadium very successfully took a vote. 99% of people who voted to authorize a potential strike at the stadium. Levy Compass workers have been fighting for a fair contract that really protects the dignity of workers in their future and allows them to sustain their families with dignity. And they have an incredible worker organization. Now, we often talk a lot about hotels, but like food service is really a huge part of what we do. It's half of our union. And the stadiums in our city have become a focal point for national and international sporting events. And it's sort of astonishing to me that these places that host events that bring in billions of dollars to the city of Los Angeles have people working inside them that are homeless, that are facing housing insecurity, that do not have stable work hours, that do not know what's going to happen next for their families. And so Dodgers workers really came together. They really fought back, and they've authorized a strike, and they authorized that strike in advance of the MLB playoffs. Not the MLB playoffs, I'm sorry, the All-Star game last Tuesday. And collectively, their power helped push negotiations forward, and they decided to stand down. But the strike authorization vote still stands. And so there may come a time and a place where we're going to invite you to walk with workers as they really challenge these huge powers, these huge economic forces that are shaping our industry. The fight is not done, the contract is not signed, and they could strike at any time. And so what they really do need is intimate solidarity and partners in that movement in all the ways that people of faith know how to do. And lastly, I'll share with you, we are definitely looking forward. We're looking forward to what it means to be invested in this community, and what does the future of this city look like? Is this going to be a place where workers' children can raise their grandchildren? Is this going to be a city where people have the opportunity or the possibility to buy homes? You know, we often think about it in the terms of working people or working poor people, but Los Angeles is becoming unattainable even to folks in the middle and the upper middle class. You know, what kind are we going to have empty city surrounding us full of these buildings that have been built with luxury housing for other people and jobs that are minimum wage? Or are we going to come together and say, you know what, this city can work for all of us? You know, we can build a collective movement of workers and community organizations and unions to demand a city that really reflects the values, the progressive values that we've been leaning into. And that's where my work is. And that's what I'm thinking about, who we are as a union. The last piece that I'll say about that is that many of you helped or prayed for or participated in some ways in the major fights that we've had as a union across Los Angeles over the years. Our last big contract fight was in 2018, and we won unprecedented gains for workers. By the end of this contract, housekeepers will be making $25 an hour. Many of them are receiving substantial pension contributions that they never received in the past. But then the pandemic happened. And while those gains were significant, it really highlights how they're not enough. Next year, those contracts expire. We're going to need you to be with us as we push this huge industry, the largest industry in our city, tourism, to the next level so that we can sustain families. And I want to say not just sustain, but help families thrive, right? We all deserve to thrive. And so that's where we want to be. And that's my little bit.
Thank you so much, Pastor Bridie. I'm so honored to collaborate with you on so many transformative campaigns, and really looking with anticipation to the power we're going to build in the years to come. And so before I turn it over to the group for our questions and vibrant discussion, as Pastor Bridie mentioned, there's so many ways going forward that you'll be able to participate, take action in our campaigns. First, I want to share how you can be in contact with me. So I'm putting in the chat my contact information, as well as the link to the Clue webpage where you can join our action alerts. I welcome anyone reaching out to me, and I'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with you about your story and what brings you to interfaith work and justice work, and how you can take leadership in our movement. And as Pastor Bridie mentioned, really, a lot of these campaigns, we wait to see what kind of actions are happening, what the situation is, and we invite people to be prepared to be there in solidarity to accompany workers, whether it's the Dodgers workers if they decide to go on strike, or whether it's many other kinds of workers at hotels and other workplaces in the year to come, if they go to the streets to demand their contracts. And with that, I'll welcome anyone to be in touch with me in the months and years ahead. And I am honored to turn it over for the questions and discussion.
Thank you so much. The way we do this usually is people raise their hands electronically. I can see one hand is already up, so we get a little bit of order to this. And since Steve's hand is up, I will start with you. Steve, thank you.
Well, I'm just so grateful to both of you for the presentation today. The scope and the breadth of work is extraordinary. And to hear it all in one place summarized as you've done so well. You've achieved so much, as well as recognizing how much work has to be done. I have several questions. I may ask one and then go back on the stack depending on other questions that are asked. Where I wanted to hear more about the responsible hotel ordinance, some details of what it covers and its status, and whether it has been reviewed by the city council, whether it can be passed and signed by the mayor or has to go into a ballot measure.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve, for that excellent question. So I think I'll share what I know and also maybe turn it over to Pastor Brady as well, that the Responsible Hotel Ordinance did receive enough signatures verified to make it to the ballot. And it would require that luxury hotel developments that destroy or displace housing are required to replace that housing at the same price point. So if a luxury hotel buys up land and destroys housing in order to build a hotel, that they're actually legally required to replace it, and not to build luxury housing, but to replace it at the same price point. Of course, incentivizing them not to jeopardize affordable housing. And Pastor Brady, would you like to clarify as well?
That's right. I believe it's going to go to ballot. And we just qualified this week. We get the final numbers in. So it's very exciting. We'll give the opportunities, give the opportunity for voters to vote it in. It's a pretty powerful piece of legislation that requires that hotels that displace housing in their development must replace it at the same size and price point. So, they want to build in the core of the city, right? And there's a lot of housing there. It's not always the best housing stock, but it's where people live. And so, and you sometimes a little bit more affordably. And so that they have to replace what they tear down. So it's not at their discretion. It is dictated, which is really important, because right now in the development deals and agreements that folks come to, there's usually discretion. It's like 10% and we build what we want and whatever that looks like, right? So this is very specific. It will also require hotels that want to do other kinds of renovations or builds to be in compliance with all existing laws. And I think that's really important, because it allows a little bit more accessibility, a little bit more power for council to weigh in on development stuff. And it will require hotels and other places that have available rooms to make them accessible to approved voucher programs to house unhoused neighbors on a temporary basis. And so I think that it's just, it's a pretty incredible piece of work, but our neighbors are going to need to vote on it, right? And I'm 100% sure that there'll be a large campaign from the industry about how it's the end of the world. And so we will need to be talking to our folks about why it's powerful and important, and will help our housing situation by protecting housing and also creating opportunities for more space that, because the hotel rooms are part of the city's numbers for available housing at night, if you can believe it. And so let's make it available to people who most need it.
As a follow-up, I can assure you that our board will meet in a special session by email to review this ordinance and to endorse it. It clearly falls within the purview and the mission and the values of ICUJP. In that connection, and oh, good, there are other hands up, so I'll go back on the stack after other questioners.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Sophia?
So the pastor mentioned something about perhaps an initiative having to do with housing. I'm not sure if she wants to talk about that.
We joined in, I think you're referring to the fact that we carried the United to House LA initiative. I don't know if you all have heard of this. It's a wonderful initiative that was sponsored by multiple organizations. And we decided that we would carry that with us as we knock doors on our own 2 petitions. And it is an initiative. Are you familiar with this? Anybody familiar with this? It's an initiative in Los Angeles that would create a luxury real estate transfer tax, and on the highest, most elite levels of property sales, which is, I think, less than, forgive me, it's been a couple of weeks since I've been knocking the doors on this, but it's been maybe a month. But I think it's like less than 3% of real estate sales in Los Angeles, but it's projected to create over $1 billion in revenue to build affordable housing and create services that help sustain people to move into housing successfully and stay there. It is the most progressive piece of housing legislation in the United States being considered across ballots. This is what I've heard multiple times from lots of different agencies. Nobody is being as aggressive as this one. And we're very happy to support it and be a part of it and hope that it comes to pass. And I haven't heard yet if it qualified. I think it did qualify, right, Matt?
Yes, it did. And I can add to that it has qualified and the campaign is just starting. And in fact, the campaign for United to House LA so another testament to the enduring work of CLU and the impact we have. CLU has been invited to be the lead organization of the Faith Caucus of the United to House LA campaign. So they have 5 regional caucuses, for example, the West Side, South LA, East Side, San Fernando Valley, and Central. And they also have faith, labor, and youth caucuses. And it'll be a big part of my role in the coming months, will actually be convening and facilitating and organizing the Faith Caucus. Members, which have public endorsed, already include some amazing congregations like Holman United Methodist Church, Ikar and Nefesh, and Valley Beth Shalom synagogues. And I believe that you guys heard from the campaign a few weeks ago, right? For your friends
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, we
And
had Kath Rogers from the ACLU, and you can add ICUJP has already endorsed that effort. And hearing what you just said, we'd like to play a pivotal role in your faith rooted campaign to support that initiative.
Okay, I think the reason I asked that question is because at the beginning of the Zoom, I mentioned that we were trying to fight the Sears Detention Center, and I've been dealing with one of Isaac Shomoff. He's a developer, and he's been doing housing, and there's a big push for affordable housing, and we know it's coming because the Olympics are coming. And we know they're going to sweep like they did in 1984. And they're trying to just pick up those that are mentally ill and house them, which is a form of, human rights violations. They're going to treat the homeless. And my concern about this fast track, because that's what's happening. They're going to say there's this crisis. We need to push affordable housing. But the controller for the city of Los Angeles has already, exposed how units currently right now are going for $550,000, $850,000 a unit, $1 million to build one unit. And Donald Trump's father made his money off affordable housing. Now, it's very scary because one of the things that they want to do, and I was on the EJ symposium yesterday, that they're going to want to fast track and circumvent CEQA to do the affordable housing. Now, there's 2 issues with that. When you're trying to push affordable housing, be very careful because that is a national security issue. Over 51% of the property in California have been purchased by people who are not from California, LLCs, including nonprofits who in their heart are doing great work. But are they the true owners of that property? Because we don't have a beneficial owner registry. So we have people who are even on the terrorist watch list. And the Pandora Papers, the Panama Papers showed how they were buying all the housing stock, not only here, but around the world. And the G7 already told President Biden, massive money laundering is taking place. And so, yes, we need affordable housing, but who is going to access those dollars? And there is already billions of dollars set up with I know our senator has pushed to do affordable housing, and then the president has also set up funds to do housing. It's a big earmark, and these billionaires are going to go after those funds, and that's what I see coming. They're going to come and they're going to take those funds, and then the price for each unit is just a ripoff of public dollars. So how do we balance fighting for affordable housing, but not doing, the billionaires' work, the 1% that's going to go after that? They're making money off the housing bonds on Wall Street, and then they're turning around and getting the contracts to do the building. And that is just, I look at the money more than anything, and I follow the money because a lot of people don't talk about money, and it's boring and you have to look at financial statements and you sound like a banker, and going into community meetings where, you know, we're dealing with fight right now in Boyle Heights and on the east side, where they want to dump and put most of the affordable housing units in our areas where we're already inundated with housing, and also in a green zone where we're dying, we're sick, we're born with illnesses because we're in a contaminated area. And I've talked to legislators and saying, how are we going to do this affordable housing and not build housing where it's contaminated? Especially in EJ
Sophia,
community.
if I may just break
Yes.
in a second here. Everything you've said is vitally important, but it's not actually exactly what we're talking about with Clue. I wondered if you could put your information in the chat, and I think it would be wonderful if we could invite you back and have a whole discussion, because I mean, I agree with absolutely everything you've said. I'm not degrading that at all. It's just that we have our Clue people here, and we have 3 hands up right now, and I don't want to sell them short. Do you understand what I'm saying? But if you put yourself in the chat, we can invite you back, and I think we'd all agree that we would love to have a whole session with you and working on this. Is that okay? I mean, I don't want to offend you at all.
Oh, not at all. I think it's just, I think it's the discussion that has to be had. And if you're boots on the ground like everyone is, this is heads up, be careful.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So as I say, please put your information in the chat, and then we can invite you back, because I know it's one that will take us a long time, but because with reference to our visitors here, I'd like to get back specifically to the Clue thing right now. Stephen, not Steve, Stephen. You're muted.
Okay, so thank you, Matthew and Pastor Brady, for this very wonderful presentation. And actually, a good deal of what I was going to ask was addressed by Sophia, but I was wondering from your perspective, what are you up against? What is the resistance? What is the argue points that you find yourself faced with as you advocate for workers? And I wish you could address that a little more deeply. Thank you.
Can I take a swing at it, Matthew? So, I mean, I think that workers are constantly facing a moving line about their own rights to organize. In the United States, the right to organize a union is federally protected. However, every administration that comes through seems to weaken those laws and the protections that they've won. It is a vacillating set of protections, unfortunately. We know that 1 in 4 workers in the United States is fired for organizing. And those are the ones that we can prove that make their way through the NLRB courts, but only a certain number of cases are taken. So some people's firings and retaliations that they experience are never even considered, right? So it is really, really tough out there for workers to confront capitalism and to push back and change. I mean, the big pushes that we are going to receive is really global capitalism, right? The companies that used to be local are multinational. And then they went from being multinational to being owned by private equity and large, huge funds that have no visible face of accountability, right? But in the face of that, we know that, and this is my faith perspective as well, right? That when workers come together, when people come together, the community comes together, we can overcome what seems like an impossible task. Because let's just be real, those pressures, those capitalist pressures, they're very real. They're very strong, but they're wrong. They're not on the arc of justice. They're not the way that they don't set a precedent that helps the world thrive, right? And so, we need very smart, comprehensive organizing. We need a lot of friends and allies in the room, and we need to do everything possible to ensure that workers are able to tell their stories, and to do smart organizing and to be with them in those moments of solidarity as they confront really huge players. The Compass Levy workers, Compass is one of the largest food service entities in the United States. And the Dodgers workers, they're Compass Levy workers who work at Dodger Stadium. They're facing a huge battle, but they're winning, right? I feel like they're winning. And it's because they have come together. I mean, nothing can underestimate, I think, really comprehensive, deep organizing that is about more than this moment, but like a vision for what is coming, right? So to me, the pressures that are there, we really are always sort of like, we cannot feel settled or calm, right? That workers have protection, that there's laws, that organizing is safe, or any of these pieces. Every single time any of us stands up and pushes back, we take a risk, but some of our risk is less than others, right? And that's where solidarity comes in. That's why it's so important for us to be with folks when they're really making those risks. And I would encourage our movement too. I think we often lift up the stories of working people and people in struggle, because it's super important to highlight the difficulties that folks are facing. But sometimes we don't always contextualize it as a person telling that story from a position of power. And they are, because God has given each person their own dignity and their own power, right? So how do we take our lead from them? You know, I think that's the question that I want to put in folks. Like, have we learned to come to the table with our own gifts and let others take the lead in some of those ways? So I don't know if that gets at your I got a little passionate there. Maybe I was following my own tangent. I don't know if that gets at your question, but I mean, there are moving large economic forces, right? I think the thing that I would take away is that side on the other side changes all the time, right? Who they are changes all the time. When I first started this work, the Beverly Hills hotels were owned by people who lived in the city. Now they most certainly are not. I don't even know who owns them, right? We don't even know, right? I mean, I guess probably the researchers know, but like the employees would see the owner of the hotel. They'd like have a relationship, right? That world doesn't exist anymore. So that changes on that end. But what stays consistent over here is the fight that working people are in to achieve housing, to sustain themselves, to build a future for their family, right? And so the only constant is really the solidarity in the community that we are building and the movement of the workers themselves. And I have chosen, and this is now I'm definitely on my soapbox, but I'll keep it real short. I've chosen the worker justice movement, and particularly the union that I'm with, though I love many of the others. You know, I worked at CLU for more than a dozen years as the program director and have deep faith and trust in many of our organizing partners. But I have chosen the labor and worker justice movement because I believe it is a strategic movement that changes people's lives and alters other parts. I mean, like, I think that capitalism and the economic system that we're in is really, really impacting all parts of our lives. And that worker power is the way for us to begin to confront it and dismantle it and achieve a more equitable future for all people.
Thank you. Marion, you had your hand up for a while. Did you change your mind? You're muted.
I put the information in chat, but since you called on me, I'll just say it out loud as well. There is an incredible organization called Downtown Crenshaw Rising, which came about because the Crenshaw Mall was up for sale. The community raised the highest bid, but the land was owned by a group outside of LA, and it was bought by Russian oligarchs to do unaffordable housing. But in response, the community organized, and they're doing an incredible job to fight back against gentrification. So the information is in the chat. It's an excellent, inspiring organization.
Thank you. I think you and Sophia, we definitely need to have this meeting. I mean, it's absolutely a priority because you're bringing so much to it. Steve, back to you. I think you've circled round and that's your turn again.
Thank you. Matthew, during COVID, we had several presentations on the eviction tsunami that was threatened. To what extent has CLU been involved in dealing with eviction, with tenants' rights? And do you have any assessment and update today on where we stand? There have been various moratoria and statewide legislation, local legislation. What kind of eviction crisis are tenants and the unhoused facing in LA County?
Thank you, Steve, for that really resonant question. And I think it really touches upon a lot of other contributions that people have made. And before I get into the issue of evictions, just to really uplift the point that when we talk about immigration justice, racial justice, as I mentioned, and housing justice, those are not separable from worker justice, because workers are immigrants, are people of color, are people in need of affordable housing or in housing crisis. So we know that as we build a movement for worker justice, we also need to engage with things like housing justice, because after all, workers need places to live that are affordable, that are accessible to their places of work. Even in my short time in my role, like the workers I've met, those who share their stories, there's so many stories of workers who work in the Hollywood hotels or the Santa Monica hotels who have really been displaced from their communities, who live very far away, places like Lancaster, Palmdale, or even farther, and need to make that commute into their places of work because it's no longer affordable for them. And we also know that this constant like housing crisis, that the constant threat of eviction for working people that Steve, you're referring to, is something that functions to complicate and hamper our ability to organize, to build sustained movements. So workers might not have as much time to like go to their workplace and organize their coworkers if they're dealing with evictions, right? If they're dealing with intimidation from landlords. And I think definitely like the current status about the eviction moratoriums in LA is something I want to learn more about. And I definitely, as I sort of transition into working for the United to House LA campaign in my CLUE role over the next few months, I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to learn about the nuances of that issue. I would say that that these housing issues are very much CLUE is delving into these spaces, is entering these spaces, but to emphasize the point, always rooted in our vision for worker justice. And I look forward to incorporating that into my work and to hoping to build a just Los Angeles, not only for at the workplace, but also for housing rights and for so much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, I just wanted to address something about affordable housing that is important to realize. If affordable housing developers take public funds, and most of them do, they must pay prevailing wage, which is comparable to union wages. And the idea is that people who build affordable housing should be paid enough to be able to live affordably. So, you know, most affordable housing developers are nonprofits. They could easily make more money developing market rate, doing market rate. It's a lot cheaper. I mean, it's a lot easier. You don't have so much paperwork. You have to deal with public opposition, and people are always looking for reasons why it's a bad idea. I'd love to see affordable housing all throughout the city, in Beverly Hills, as well as in, you know, South LA, South Central LA. One thing in gentrifying communities is that affordable housing can help alleviate displacement. As long as you have a policy like the one in Pasadena, where people who live in the community or have been displaced from the community are given priority for affordable housing. So with good policy, affordable housing can be a blessing for low-income communities. But there needs to be good protection for the workers, for the construction workers, and also for the community itself.
Thank you. Rick.
Thank you very much for the presentation, folks. And I don't know if Pastor Bridie is still with us.
No, left.
Yep. Okay. But I do want to circle back specifically on what you guys were talking about with the workers that are working at Dodger Stadium. That there is a great opportunity there because there is no more self-conscious organization about their image in Los Angeles than the Dodger organization, especially at this point, because I would think somebody like Magic Johnson does not want to get a reputation as, you know, as Mr. Burns from the Simpsons, you know. So I think there is a really good opportunity to do that. And so there's some place where we can really get some ground going. I just wanted to say that, and thank you very much for all the great work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
I can't put up my
Oh,
virtual
sorry,
hand.
Lucy. Yes, Lucy, sorry. Go on.
When I put up the virtual hand, I get kicked into the post Zoom. So I wanted to thank you all so much for your encouragement and your inspiration. I did want to add the problem of global warming to the mix. From what you've said and how everything is going global, I'm wondering if the same principles could affect I'm having a hard time finding the words. It could affect us globally if we can go about organizing these people that are taking well, I'll just go back to the specifics. The people who used to own the Beverly Hills hotels lived in Beverly Hills. Now they live all over the world and they're broken up into shares and are run by a financial services company. How can we then organize and at least create awareness if in fact you talked about capitalist pressures, if the capitalist pressures are what's creating the global warming, how can we save ourselves? And thank you for your encouragement. Getting out with a clipboard seems to be the first step. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for that really wonderful question and very resonant. I think your question touches upon so many really important points. One for me is the importance of collaboration between different organizations, different movements who sometimes are used to being sort of isolated or in their own sort of spheres, right? So as you mentioned, there is a link between all these economic issues and the moment we find ourselves in with capitalism and environmental justice, environmental issues and global warming. And I think I've been inspired by the ways in which our different movements, like social and racial justice movements, have been able to partner or build common narratives with environmental and climate justice organizations in the past number of years. And I think one example that I think I can give, because it was a public action just this past week, that another very public campaign that Unite Here is doing is a boycott of the Terranea resort in Palos Verdes. There's a boycott of Chateau Marmont and also of Terranea. And on the Terranea campaign, that boycott has been active for a number of years. And Unite Here has actually partnered with environmental organizations, including at an action a few days ago, because this resort, which has already been mistreating their workers, also is environmentally, has a really bad record, right? They pollute the water, they are mistreating the wildlife there. So there's actually this common cause and opportunity for like labor and faith-rooted justice movement to collaborate and make it clear that all of our issues are linked. I also really resonated with what you shared, touching upon what Bridie said, Pastor Bridie, about sometimes like we're the work, like we are in advocate with the workers who are negotiating with their employers, with corporations, right? But now it's often like multinational big corporations rather than local families, for example, in Beverly Hills owning those hotels. But as Pastor Brady mentioned, our labor justice movements and our racial and social justice movements are rooted in community. I think that's a really important point that she made. We're rooted in community, so that even though this transition in like the nature of capital or the nature of business and of ownership of land and property has changed, and that does affect like policies from their end, that we have the tools in our history, in our communities, and the lived experiences of workers and community members to continue to respond and resist.
That's
And
actually thrilling what you just said. Thank you so much.
And I think the last, thank you, I appreciate it. And I think the last point is we can respond to that sort of internationalism through our own internationalism, building solidarity with workers and those seeking justice in other parts of the country and in other countries. So some examples that come to mind, for the Chateau Marmont campaign, there were some actions where Unite Here workers based here in Los Angeles went to the United Kingdom because the owner of the Chateau Marmont also owns hotels in other places, including in London. So there was an action, simultaneous actions, people in London, people in Hollywood, where people could like be together in solidarity because of their common cause. And that's just one example of the ways in which we can use internationalism and solidarity with people organizing and fighting for justice elsewhere to sort of respond to this sort of internationalism that we confront in the power that we face. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, is your hand up intentionally at this point?
Yes, if you feel we have time for one more question.
This would be the last one. And Sophia, please do give us your information. We'd really like to have you back to discuss in more detail. I didn't want to cut you off, really. Anyway, Steve, thank you.
And let me just pause on the screen in case anyone is trying to raise their hand otherwise. Matthew, we're very interested in movement building within the peace and justice community. You described mobilizing and organizing. And I think our group would appreciate some further definition. Many times those words are coalesced, they're thrown together, but I've been learning more about it, and I think we all would appreciate a few minutes to develop, especially Clue's theory of change when it comes to mobilizing and organizing.
Thank you, Steve, for that really great question. So those words, educate, mobilize, and organize, in that order, are in Clue's mission statement. And that's a really powerful question for how do we conceive of these things and how do we view them as coming together in order to build the movement that we need and that we want. So we educate the faith community and our broader public about these issues, about the struggles of workers, about the systemic and historical systems and conditions that this analysis that we really need to develop in order to tackle things like systemic racism and economic exploitation. We do this education, which is not for its own sake as much as to build our movement, to build a common understanding and analysis. And that's a big part of it. And then I think that mobilizing and organizing go together. They are different, but we do both at different times. So mobilizing is bringing people out for actions, mobilizing people to take action. So after the murder of George Floyd, we mobilized clergy, but also faith leaders, partner organizations, as you saw in that video clip, just a tease of that, to come together for this really powerful action and memorial service in honor of George Floyd and in demand of racial justice and police accountability. But mobilization is what we do all the time, but we also strive for more. So we organize people. Organizing is, for example, what we did in the Raise LA campaign, the signature gathering for the ballot initiatives, where we can go to your congregation and inspire you and even get you to take action. But it's really inspiring you and moving you to organize other people, to move other people to take action, in which that's how our movement grows. And our movement needs to grow, not only so it can be equitable and inclusive, because really everyone in our community needs to be heard, needs to have their input, needs to be in leadership, but also we need to grow so we can be sustainable, because burnout is real. Burnout is everywhere in the justice movement. There is so much work. There is so much struggle, issues, injustices that we address. And that's the society that we live in. Those are the systems we have. And we need lots of people in this work so that it becomes sustainable, so that we can all really contribute and affirm each other and take care of each other in this work. From my own Jewish faith tradition, there's a quote from the Mishnah, from a Jewish legal and wisdom text from this compiled in the 2nd century CE, which we love to say in Jewish justice spaces, which is that it's not your responsibility to complete the work, but neither are you free to refrain from the work. So everyone, really does their part, contributes to a movement, but also alongside in solidarity with everyone else. And that's how we build our movement for justice.
I have 2 minutes to say goodbye.
Thank you very much. I think we have to close the discussion here. Sorry, somebody's talking. I don't know if somebody's not muted and somebody's trying to contribute. Oh, it's Anthony chatting. Okay. What we do now is we think about people or situation. Oh no, sorry, I will backtrack here. Do we have any reports from any other organizations that are linked to us that are not actually part of us that anybody wishes to make? Any announcements?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that, yeah, we're organizing to stop the Sears Detention Center. They want to house 5,500 mentally ill people at the Sears Tower, together with people who are dealing with substance abuse, and that to us is a crime against humanity. They also want to build another 5,000 units in the same area, in the parking lot, to do housing. And this is a private developer. And we're probably going to do a massive march and do a human chain around the detention center, or proposed detention center. And the community is just angry and fed up, and they've had enough with the councilman, which is DeLeon, who refuses to meet with them. And so they're supporting his recall. So I'm going to be on a call later today on that. But our main focus is stopping this type of billionaire coming into our community and forcing this horrible project upon the city. And I met with the billionaire, and he shared with me that everyone in the city council was in favor of it, and that he met with the supervisors, and the only supervisor who did not meet with him was Hilda Solis, and they were also favorable of it, because, like I mentioned, they want to do the sweep of everyone before the Olympics. So we have they may want to circumvent the city by pushing the fast tracking of affordable housing through the state. And that's where we're at. We wouldn't want a facility like what they're proposing to happen at Sears to happen around California or anywhere else in this country. So we're boots on the ground doing it, mobilizing, meeting. But the community is very angry because they want to do it around 3 schools and right across the street from Wyvenwood and the projects up the street. And as you know, we do have a homeless crisis, and we cannot allow developers to come into our communities when we need to build mental institutions, and not let them use housing as a way to say we need to house the homeless, because we work with the homeless, we feed the homeless, we know they need help. And one of the homeless women that we work with that was living at Hollenbeck Park went into a tiny home, and within 2 weeks she left because there were no supportive services, and she was going crazy, not having her medication. So tiny homes isn't the answer for the mentally ill.
Sophia, I'm sorry, I have to do it again. We're really short on time. Please put in the chat your information and any connections you'd like us to make. And we do hear you, but we're supposed to finish at 9:30, and I have 3 other hands up. So Michael, can you give us kind of quick announcement, if it's quick?
Yeah, quick. I just want to say on behalf of KPFK radio, I responded to what I think it was Matthew said about burnout. I think that KPFK has kind of burnt out its current listenership with fundraising on the air, and unfortunately, we probably have to start another on-air fund drive August 1st. So I want to try to appeal to Clue to help us reach out to the base membership of all these, faith-based rooted communities to try to do an off-air membership drive for the station, so that we'd be happy to have if people want to try to have some speakers go out, or if you yourselves could take that up as something to do, to just urge people to take out a basic membership in the station. Because if 10 or 20,000 people would sign up, that would solve a lot of problems for KPFK, and it would enable it to be a mechanism and a platform to spread the word for the kind of campaigns you're involved in. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Francis?
Just a reminder, what I announced in the affiliate report, would really love to have you all stay on and talk about how to bring people in for our future programs that we're having, how to build our movement and support things that are going on.
Thank you. Now, are there any people that people wish to lift up, or people or situations that you wish us to remember before we come to our closing prayer?
If you can,
go on.
You can spare some good thoughts from my dad. He had hip replacement surgery, and he's, in the hospital still, just kind of getting over what he has. It's funny, he was more upset about missing the All-Star game earlier this week than about being in the hospital. So that's the kind of guy he is. He doesn't get down very much at all. So it's a big inspiration for me and the rest of the family. And yeah, he's a tough guy. It skipped a generation, but he's a tough guy.
I would like to lift up my friend's son-in-law. His name is George, and his family. He got into a nasty bicycle accident. He'd been in an induced coma for the last 10 days. They're bringing him out of it now. They have no idea how much brain damage there will be, if any. He's got 2 young children, and my friend's daughter also has a full-time job. They both do. And you can imagine the situation they're all in. So I'd like to lift them up, George and his family. Anthony?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Council Member John Kennedy passed away yesterday very suddenly, and he was a real voice for racial and social justice in our council. And it was really heartbreaking for us to lose him this way. So please hold his family and our community in your prayers.
Thank you.
I would like to lift up our planet. We see fires burning in Europe and in Yosemite and in other parts. We're burning up the earth. We're burning up the world right now. And we need all the prayers and all the action we can possibly arrange, mobilize, organize, educate to stop this insanity where we're just burning up our life support system.
Okay, we now come to our closing prayer. I did ask Anthony, rather short notice, if he was able to do it. Are you, Anthony? Or did you not receive my notice? Those damn chats. You're muted.
I said I'm a little distracted because I'm leaving for a Quaker retreat for the weekend in a few minutes. So I just
all right, okay, in that case, I will let you off.
Space to do that.
Okay. The other person I wondered, Matthew, you have been in the firing line all the time, but just listening to your academic background and the way you speak, I wondered if you could just kind of, sum up the last couple of hours. It's only a few words I'm asking for, not an enormous, great big prayer, but just to kind of like settle us into a slight meditation for the end, if that were possible. I'm sorry to dump it upon you like that.
Thank you, Rose. I would be honored to. Again, thank you so much to ICUJP for inviting me and Clue to join you this Friday morning, this Friday of Justice. As we gather in our blessed sacred community, as we hope to build our blessed community here in Los Angeles, in Southern California and beyond, let us have the strength, the wisdom, the discernment, the courage, and the persistence to join in true solidarity, in true togetherness, in true discernment, and with kindness but determination to build the just world that we want for workers and for all of our communities. For my own Jewish faith tradition, there's a prayer that often we recite when coming to meet people, gather with people for the first time in a long while, or come into a momentous place of joy or meaning. And it's called the Shehechianu, and I'm be honored to share it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lezman hazeh. And that means, blessed are you, eternal sovereign God, for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for enabling us to reach this moment. Amen. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Wow.
It's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rose, for your careful, kind facilitation again this morning. Thanks, Matthew and Guillermo and Bridie. This was just top notch. I invite everyone back next week for Hector Viagra of the ACLU for another look at the hard work that's going on in Los Angeles. Every one of you are card-carrying members now of ICUJP. If this is your first visit to us, please come back to these Friday forums every week. We've been doing this now in our 21st year following 9/11, and do save the date of September 11. And please stay with us at it'll be about 9:40 or so when Carol Francis convenes a committee that is a continuation of our anti-racism work and faith-based networking that is so important. So thank you all. Be well and be safe.